Okay, thank you, Dr. Gran, for coming and talking to us today. What books are you reading right now?
Right now, I have I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, which I just started, so I can't even tell you really what it's about, but it was one that was recommended on a list that I saw. So I just started that one. I'm still reading The Sixth Extinction because we read that in the AP Environmental Science class, and that one makes me cry. There was another one that I started, and now I can't remember the name of it because I put it down and I wasn't interested in finishing it. So
That's fine.
can't
That doesn't
remember the name
count,
of
I
it.
guess.
Yeah.
Okay, and what's the last great book that you read?
um, the last great one I read was probably Born a Crime. Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, and I was really excited to see that Jeff was going to be reading it in I think it's the ninth grade English classes that are reading it now. It made me laugh, made me cry. It was really interesting, and I read it in his, like, I could hear his voice as I was reading it. So that was a good one.
Tell us how you like to read. Where, when, how?
It's situational. Like, ideally, I'd love to be sitting on a beach with my toes in the sand and an umbrella, and some water, sunshine, waves crashing. That's can't always happen. So I usually just sit in a recliner and a cat in my lap or two, and just get comfy, cover the feet, stay nice and toasty warm.
Mm-hmm. Nice. What are the genres of books that you like to read? What types of books?
Usually science fiction and fantasy are my favorites, although I also really like Stephen King, though I'm not a huge fan of horror in general, but I like Stephen King. So fantasy and science fiction have been ones that I've read for a really long time that I kind of am drawn to.
Mm-hmm. And how do you find out what books you want to read? You said you saw a book on a list.
Yeah, I look for lists from various places. I look at the books that are winning awards, the books that are recommended by, like, the New York Times seller lists, what library associations are recommending to read, what other friends are reading, what they recommend on Goodreads.
Mm-hmm. So you're on Goodreads?
Yeah. I'm not active.
Okay.
Because it takes me a really long time to finish a book these days, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Of course. What kind of reader were you as a child?
Constant. Yeah, just it was my very favorite thing to do when I was a kid was to read. So that was the one thing we always had lots and lots of, were books everywhere. We'd go to the library, I'd come back with an literal armful of books and read through them all, and then the next week go back and get another armful. So I just lost myself in the worlds of the books that I read.
Starting around what age, and why do you think you got into books?
For as long as I can remember, and I think that was because my dad was a storyteller. Like, he didn't read to us, but he would put on, like, a classical music piece and then tell a story that matched kind of the ups and downs of the musical piece, and that got me interested in just, I could picture the things that he was talking about and telling a story about. And then my mom always read to me and started putting books in my hands when I was really young. And I think it started out of jealousy too, because my brother he's only 16 months older than I am, but because of when our birthdays were, he started school 2 years before I was going to start school. So he's coming home with all these books and all this fun work that he's doing, and which he didn't like to do, but I was all over it. So yeah, as long as I can remember.
And it sounds like you also went to the library when you were a kid. Do you have any favorite library memories?
So my best friend in elementary school, her mom actually worked at the library, so we would get to go and volunteer at the Webster Public Library in Webster, New York, with her, and we would spend all kinds of time doing the things that, like the reshelving of the books and the organizing of things and the setting up displays and the behind the scenes things that you don't see when you go as a patron of the library. So that was kind of fun. And then I was nerdy enough that I would, if we had some downtime, I'd go find an encyclopedia and do a pretend research report on something. I probably shouldn't admit that out loud.
That's okay. Libraries are great. That's awesome. Are there any books that you want to talk about that you think that are special to you?
So I did actually bring one with me. There were three that I could think of that I thought, if there were three favorites that I had that I ever had to talk about, and they're two of them are sort of obscure. This one was, they're actually the favorite gifts that I've been given.
Okay.
One was when I was young, my uncle gave me a first edition, leather-bound, gilded-paged, complete works of Edgar Allan Poe, because as a fifth and sixth grader, I was a huge fan of Edgar Allan Poe. And so he had this book, and he gifted it to me. And so that one I still have. It doesn't look as good as it did back then.
Mm-hmm.
The gilding is kind of fallen off and that sort of thing. But that was one of my favorites. And then around the same time, my mom gave me the box set of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which that opened a whole new world that I've never left. And then this one I actually got much more recently, which is... it's in French. It's part of a 17-book series of natural history that was published around the time of the French Revolution. So it's one of the earlier written or published pieces. There's no good way to do this. Hang on. So I don't know if you can see that at all, but it's got these fun plates too that fold out. That I don't want to tear it. So it's this one's the has to do with the genealogy of dogs, basically, is what that is. So it's got really cool stuff in it like that.
So what attracted you to picking up that book?
Well, it was a gift,
Okay.
but the person who gave it to me, I think, didn't even realize how much I would appreciate it, because the time of the French Revolution is one of my favorite times in history to study, and then it's a book of natural history. So it was a double whammy.
Mm-hmm. And that's a time of the rise of science and
when paleontology was not even really a thing yet, and so we didn't know a lot about how species generate and reproduce and travel and all kinds of stuff.
So you talked about books you received as gifts.
Yeah.
Are they books you like to give as gifts?
So most of the time when I give books, it's to kids. And one that's always on the list for young kids is Where the Wild Things Are, because it was one of my favorites when I was little. And then the other ones that most people give, like The Giving Tree and Oh, the Places You'll Go. So books like that. And then sometimes, depending on the person, Where the Sidewalk Ends is another one.
Great
Classic
books.
kids books that,
So if you were to have a dinner party and you can invite three guests, either characters in books or authors.
So I had to write this one down because there were too many. So I thought that I would cheat. Now I can't find it though. Oh, okay. So well, Tolkien, of course. I would want to talk to him because The Lord of the Rings was a big thing, but also two other authors that I really appreciated when I really started getting into science fiction and fantasy were Madeleine L'Engle, and A Wrinkle in Time was one of my favorites, and then Anne McCaffrey, who does all the Dragon Riders of Fern books. So I think I'd want to have a dinner party with them. But then there was also Ta-Nehisi Coates I'd like to sit down and have a conversation with, and maybe Margaret Atwood, Gloria Steinem. So I have a whole list of people that I'd like
have
to
a couple different dinner parties.
Yeah, a big dinner party.
Good idea. Are there any books that you wish had turned into movies, or are books that you think are bad versions of movies that are bad versions of the books?
I'm one of those people who, for almost always, for me, the book is better than the movie. And I can't think of anyone that, the books that I really, really love and hold in my heart a lot, I don't want to see turned into movies, because then it'll change it. It's not going to be my version of that book and those characters and what they look like and sound like and what the situation is. And so I don't want to see that happen. And there have been so many that have been done badly too, some of the Stephen King, Hearts in Atlantis and Dreamcatcher in particular, that Stephen King novels that I really, really enjoyed. One is a series, the Hearts in Atlantis is a series of stories, but they turned them into films and they're just bad. don't watch it.
Yeah. I hear you. Is there anything else? Why do you think reading is important?
Well, how much time do we have?
Go ahead.
That's not a question that's easy to answer in a few minutes. Reading is important. For one thing is because it opens a lot of different worlds. I think, like at least that's what it was for me. There were worlds that I was able to inhabit that I never would have known if it weren't for the fact that they existed in books. I think that for me, that's the most important. I think also just, being a critical consumer of information, and you can't do that without being a reader, a thoughtful reader, being introspective about what it is that you're looking at and consuming in terms of what you look at.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's so much information right now available on a second's notice, and a lot of it isn't good information. And so reading the things that we read, that you make us read in school, those are the things that help us become these critical consumers of information. So.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Sit down with a good book. Take the time. I wish I had more time to do it. I wish I made more time to do it. I need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Gran. Appreciate it.